Welcome back to the Convo Couch, everyone. Pasta Jardula here.
I'm Fiorella.
And Johnny Sue is hanging out with Oz from More Media on the ones and twos, overalls, and everything. Fam, We have a very special show today. As you can see in the middle of us, ladies and gentlemen, we have the Convo Couch's senior foreign policy analyst. I can call him that now because he's been on the show more than anybody. Mark Sleboda is with us today, ladies and gentlemen. How you doing, Mark?
Pasta, Fiorella, Oz, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the conversation couch.
I love it. I love it. That's like Sleboda's thing for us, just for us, fam.
Yeah, he's very proper about it. I love it. I'm excited to talk about this. I've been monitoring the situation all the way while I was in Nicaragua. So I really want to hear what Mark has to say. But Fam, do you have an announcement before that?
Yes, we have a quick announcement. We're going to get right to it with Mark. But this is going to be a very special show, ladies and gentlemen. As you know, the Convo Couch loves to get boots on the grounds. We just came back. Fam was just was in Nicaragua. We went to the global south. We were in Nicaragua, Peru, and Honduras covering elections. It was amazing. But we want to get our butts out to D.C. this weekend because there's going to be a huge anti-mandate rally that's going on there with a lot of people involved. And we want to be able to cover it on the ground, ask the questions out there in person. So what's going to happen is a very special fan of ours, a follower, a good friend, he's going to help us out. Listen to what he has to say.
Greetings, all you conscientious connoisseurs of concisely convoluted conversation. It's your old friend, Ungi, the blathering boomer, and I'm here to blather at you about sending the Convo Couch to report on this weekend's big rally in Washington, D.C., because these guys are second to none when it comes to honest reporting of an event. So I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is, and I will match the first $200 in donations given during today's podcast. So you Lapasori, hit that donate button and I'll be matching you. Let's send these guys to Washington.
You heard it, ladies and gentlemen, right there. So today's show is special. All the love, all the Ray donations today will be matched up to $200. So if we get up to 200, it will be 400. You know how hard it is, ladies and gentlemen, traveling nowadays. All the restrictions involved, all the prices, everything. We got to go there. We got to put ourselves up. We got to feed ourselves to do what we got to do. We're the little guys. We don't have the money like CNN and Fox does to go out there and send people in the field. So you got to help us out like you always do and put us out there. So today's donations will be doubled up to $200. I told Ungi, who's watching live, he's texting me right now, that wait until the very end of the show. And at the very end of the show, he's going to match whatever we have in the kitty. So it's a very important show for us today. So do us a favor right off the jump. 2 of the 3 sections today will be on YouTube. The final section will be on Rokfin and Rokfin only. So get on over to Rokfin if you can right now. If not, get on over there after. We'll share the links. Go out there, guys. Share this on Twitter. Share it on Facebook. Let's get as many people in the house today. As you can see, I'm in the Niko house studios, and I'll be on with Niko's show after. But right now, we got to get our butts to Washington. And if you can help us out in any way, shape, or form, we'd greatly appreciate it. So get on over to Rokfin. We'll keep monitoring. Let's get it rolling there. We'll make an announcement every single time. We'll stop, and we'll make sure that everybody knows that all donations are matched there. Make sure you keep that up in the chatter, in the chat, guys. Let people know as new people come in, like, what did I miss? Let them know that we're doubling the donations today. Fam, let's bring on Mark. What do you say?
Yes, let's do it here. Fam, if you want to go ahead and start with the first question while I pull up the slides.
Okay, you pull up the slides. Mark, it's great to see you. I called you our senior analyst because you've now been on the show more than any other guest yet right now. Now, you, number one, you're at the top of the hill.
I'm glad it's not because I'm old. That's it.
Well, I mean, you're wise. That's why we sought you out, too, because you're great at foreign policy, especially in this region. So when this stuff was going on, I said, we got to get Mark on the show right away. Before we get to Kazakhstan, let's talk a little about Ukraine and Russia, since you're so close there and you have so much knowledge. Western media is saying that Russia is invading Ukraine. I mean, this is what you hear on MSNBC, even the liberal channels here. But Russian troops have been there, moving around their own border, and NATO-backed troops have been expanding. Is Russia doing anything wrong, or is the West just trying to manufacture consent to push NATO up to the border?
Yeah, well, that all depends on your position. It is subjective. Is Russia doing something wrong? do you regard the regime that's in Kiev as legitimate? They seized power with open U.S. and Western support. Victoria Nuland, the neocon maven, wife of Robert Kagan, out handing cookies in Maidan Square. I mean, do you think the United States would allow foreign countries, officials and politicians to come into Washington and to cheerlead on and support crowds that were calling for the overthrow of the Biden government? No, of course not. That's a coup. That's egregious meddling. It was a putsch. It was violent. It was unconstitutional. They had a Banderite right.
Real quick. So let me just to make sure we know that we do look at it as illegitimate, but Russia has since then acknowledged that the current government in Ukraine is the legitimate government.
No.
Zelensky, correct?
No, that is not true. No.
So please hear.
Yeah, they have recognized the comedian turned president of the regime as the de facto authorities in Ukraine. That is the difference. The Russian position is until they politically reconcile with the people of the east of their own country, the Donbass, that have never accepted the overthrow of the government back in 2014. According to the Minsk Accords, the Minsk II Accords, that were approved by the UN Security Council, by a UN Security Council resolution, which the US signed on to, and thus became international law. Until Kiev fulfills them, which they have dragged on for over 7 years now and refuse to fulfill, because it would mean sitting down with the leadership in Donbass. It would mean granting a degree of federalization to the Donbass and possibly to other parts of the country. It would mean a general amnesty. The political crisis it would ensue, the ultranationalists, the Banderite fascists that back the regime in Kiev would turn on it. There would be a second, or depending on how you count it, a third Maidan, and then the regime would fall. So they refuse to fulfill it. And the US and the EU, they are perfectly happy with that. And what Russia has seen is while these years have dragged on, the frozen conflict continues. Daily, there are artillery shelling of the Donbass, residential areas, wounded, injured every single day. These people live half in and out of their basements, right, as bomb shelters. This has continued. And what Russia sees now is the de facto on the ground NATOization of Ukraine. There are some, according to the Russian government, some 10,000 NATO trainers and advisors on the ground in Ukraine now. 10,000 of them, right? That shades of Vietnam for anyone, right? That's how you creep into a conflict. There are the United Kingdom has announced that they're going to be building military bases in Ukraine, naval bases on the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. Turkey, a NATO member, has sold the regime in Kiev advanced combat drones. Yet Turkey's actually become a drone power. I know it's a weird world, but that it has the Bayraktar TB2, and they have used them in violation of the Minsk Accords to conduct airstrikes of the Donbass. And the US and the UK keep piling more and more advanced weapons, missile systems into the regime in Kiev, which of course they're using to kill their own people, right? Their own people, the people of East Ukraine. Not Russians, certainly, at least not at the moment. And what Russia sees with this ongoing, NATOization on the ground, the status quo is just no longer acceptable, right? The status quo is cementing NATO militarily in place in Ukraine, and the body count in East Ukraine keeps going up. So they made demands. And I think it's fair to call them demands, ultimatums to the U.S. and NATO. They sent them draft security treaties and said, look, we've got serious security issues here. And if you do not agree to stop the eastward expansion of NATO, agree that Ukraine and Georgia should be neutral countries as a buffer between NATO and the Russian-led Collective Security Treaty Organization, because these are internally divided countries that you have meddled in and exploited the divisions and brought to power political forces, that are intent on dragging the countries into NATO, but we don't regard that as legitimate. It's not representative of the people, the entire population of the countries. You need to stop conducting these massive war drills on our borders. In November, the U.S. was running strategic bombing drills, nuclear-capable bombers, in the Black Sea to Crimea. In the month of November, they did this 30 times. That is nuclear bombing drills, right? Yeah. Every single day, right? That's insane, right? Of course, Russia is scared at this point. Of course, they see NATO as a threat. Anyone who says that NATO is a defensive organization is in la-la land. I mean, I served in the U.S. military. I served in NATO operations. NATO has never, ever been used defensively against another state. It has been used offensively as a platform for U.S. military power in Libya, in Syria, in Serbia, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, that NATO and its member states. Of course, Russia has reason to fear.
Mark, aren't they breaking a treaty or a promise made where NATO said they wouldn't expand eastward?
Yeah. There was no actual treaty. Let's face it.
Okay.
Gorbachev was a naive, senile old guy who trusted the West at their word. And when they, pinky swore with their fingers behind their back that, right, if he dissolved, the Warsaw Pact and allowed Germany to reunify, that NATO would not move one step forward. And it wasn't just U.S. leaders. It was actually multiple Western leaders. The documentation is out there. The archives have been open. Anyone who says it didn't happen, but it wasn't in writing. It wasn't legally binding. And they just laughed at him behind their hands, right? Putin's opinion is that is no longer acceptable. And Russia is no longer a weak pushover, more countries can just be color revolutioned on its borders, and Russia just has to accept that. They won't anymore. They're not going to accept it. They now see themselves in a Cuban Missile Crisis scenario. They're at an existential security moment for Russia. So unless the U.S. and NATO agreed to these demands, which they have refused to, then Russia has said, we'll have to take our security into our own hands. We will have to guarantee our own security. And we will do that by military technical measures. What does that mean? What are military tech? That is the U.S. diplomatic speak equivalent of saying all options are on the table. And because the U.S. is saying that right now, both countries are saying to each other, all options are on the table, which is pretty frightening. But that could mean putting new hypersonic missile systems in Kaliningrad. It could mean reopening Russian military bases in Cuba or putting them in Venezuela, or it could mean a military intervention in Ukraine of some form. And I would say that is where things are going at this moment. I don't think any final decision has been made yet. The Kremlin is waiting for a formal written response from the White House after their meetings. But I think that's where things are going. Russia is not massing troops on the Ukrainian border, right? That's a simplification. Actually, Ukraine, meaning the Kiev regime, has more forces on the border than Russia. They have half of their military, 125,000 troops on the border, which also means, right there on Donbass, presenting a threat to that. But the Russian military has created logistical centers a couple hundred kilometers back in Western Russia that if they're given the order that this is the decision that Putin is making, this is the option that he will take, they can then in short order start a military buildup and conduct an intervention in Ukraine. That's too complicated to explain to most people. No, there is not a mass Russian military buildup on the border more than there has been for the last 7 years since the civil conflict and proxy war started. But yes, Russia has moved military assets into the west of their own country in a position where, yes, they could launch an intervention within a couple weeks if the decision is made. And I'd say 60% likely that is where things are going in February.
Mark, quickly, you mentioned these red lines that Russia is drawing, but let's go back. You said 7 years of this conflict. How did the backing of the U.S. and the West of neo-Nazis in 2014 affect directly what's happening right now? Because I see, obviously, I believe from what I've seen that these are the consequences of a lot of those interventions, correct?
Yeah. Now, you take a look, the leaders of Ukraine are not themselves neo-Nazis, but the vanguard, the ideological people on the street who fought this regime into power they are Banderite fascists. They are the heirs of the World War II era West Ukrainian Nazi collaborators. West Ukraine wasn't even part of Ukraine up until just before World War II. They were part of the Austro-Hungarian Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth for hundreds of years. They hate Russians. Unlike East Ukrainians who see Russians as fraternal brothers, sisters, people across the border just like us. In fact, my cousin, my wife, there's so much intermarriage there. It is two competing conceptions of Ukrainian national identity and what Ukraine is. And you can pull up any election map in Ukraine, any sociological poll for the last 30 years and see that almost geographical divide, straight down the middle. To deny it is simply denying reality. And that is, still what is going on here. And Ukraine was okay. They were maintaining their stability as a country by balancing between the east of the west of the country, which meant geopolitically staying neutral, not siding with the West, not joining NATO, not siding with Russia. But that neutrality is no longer acceptable to the U.S. As far as they've concerned, they've geopolitically flipped the country, and it is now in their camp. They have a regime in power that wants it to be so. They've repressed the opposition in the East, the political voices. The leader is now imprisoned. All the media outlets, TV, the internet, the major publications that were critical of the government from the east of the country have all been shut down. They've all been banned. And at the same time, the U.S. is saying that Ukraine is a democracy. It's Orwellian. It is Orwellian doublespeak. It is now pro-U.S. It is pro-Western, but it is not democratic in the slightest. And still, these militias, these Banderite fascist militias, these West Ukrainian ultranationalists, they are now, not only do they have still military militia formations, but they are integrated into the security services, the police, the military, the major political parties. One of the advisors of the General Chief of Staff of the Ukrainian military is Dmitry Yarosh, the founder and head of the right sector. I mean, and to say that because Zelensky is Jewish, this is just Russian propaganda, that's nonsense. Because you forget that the one thing that the Nazis killed more of than the Jewish people is Russians and leftists. And as long as these West Ukrainian ultranationalist Banderite fascists, the principal object of their hatred is ethnic Russians, leftists, and Slovak East Ukrainians who look favorably on, Russia and the Soviet Union, that violence is okay. That hatred is acceptable. Those are neo-Nazis that serve U.S. foreign policy goals. They are moderate neo-Nazis, to use the terminology from Syria all over again. We've seen this in South and Central America. We've seen it in the Middle East. Now we see it in Ukraine. And actually, there's a long history. The U.S. supported these same people's grandparents at the end of World War II and the beginning of the Cold War. And they're going to do it again because we have word now that the CIA ground branch paramilitary has been training these same Ukrainian far-right paramilitaries for the last 7 years to launch a insurgency campaign if Russia intervened in Ukraine. And now it's about to be launched, and that would just hit the news in the last week.
It's kind of great to have you on right now because you're not going to get this information on MSNBC or CNN. And this is when I first started following Mark Sleboda, was in 2014, kind of understanding the situation. And now we've come full circle today. And it's also not surprising, Mark, that now that the band is back together, meaning the Biden administration, all the the John Sullivans, the Victoria Nulands, the Anthony Blinken, it's back in the Ukraine again. Like, these people have a disdain for Russia. But my question to you right now is that we saw Crimea was annexed, right? Obviously, we've had talk before.
My wife is Crimean.
Yeah.
And she would not accept that terminology at all.
They decided to break off and join Russia.
They had a referendum.
Absolutely.
You don't have to believe Russia. You can believe Pew or Gallup or GFK. 93% plus of Crimeans wanted to get out of Dodge in Ukraine. Their autonomy was taken away, and they wanted to rejoin Russia.
You know what? I used the wrong terminology. Russia did accept them with open arms, right?
Of course.
Yeah. Now, my question to you is this. Obviously, you said on the show before, Russia doesn't want to take Ukraine back. That would be way too much. They don't want to deal with it. But why not the Donbass region, right? I mean, wouldn't that at least, if they were able to join Mother Russia, because there's mostly ethnic-speaking Russians there, the Donbass region and that other particular reason, if they join Russia, that would at least then solve the problem of the kind of quote-unquote civil war that's been propped and fueled by the West. Would it not? I mean, it might not solve the NATO issue, but it would solve that one issue, no?
Well, first of all, actually, the regime in Kiev actually controls a majority of Donbass. It is only the major cities of Donetsk and Lugansk, which are the most heavily populated parts of Donbass, that are actually part of the LNR. So there's really no clear dividing line. And if you take a look at the polls in East Ukraine, the elections, they don't support the government in Kiev. They never have. They didn't support Poroshenko. Zelensky, his approval ratings are now like 20%. In the East, it's practically zero, right? The people of East Ukraine are, at this point, politically, economically suffering just almost as much as the people in Donbass. Obviously, they're not living under the shelling as well. And Russia, at this point, when they see, the situation of this NATOization on the ground, I think that they see right now that East Ukraine is just the Donbass is probably not enough. I think they're looking at rooting this cancer in Kiev out at the source. West Ukraine may be a lost cause. They may never give up on West Ukraine and tell the West to take it. But the way I think I see things, because of the amount of Russian forces that have now moved into Belarus border from Kiev is only 80 kilometers. That's a really short distance. And that would be a very capable decapitation strike. I think they can root out the regime in Kiev, that seized power there in 2014. I think that is what is as at least one of the options. Again, I don't think a final decision has been made, but that I think would solve more of Russia's and the people of East Ukraine's problem at this point, more than simply trying to absorb the Donbass. I think they would be much happier with a government that was reflective of the people of Donbass as well.
You're saying they're going to regime change the regime change?
Yeah, I think that is definitely on the table.
Okay. Sam, go ahead. I'm sorry.
To be fair, I was arguing for that since 2014, as were some of Putin's advisors. And they thought that this farce in Kiev would collapse over time. And, it continues to collapse, but it never collapses.
You talked about where we're at and where you think this is headed, but is there any possibility of other nations getting involved? We've seen the conflict between Russia and the United States countless times, and a lot of the alarms raised. But this time around, I think things are different geopolitically in the macro sense. You have China getting involved in a lot of countries via the Belt and Road Initiative. You have Iran also getting involved in Latin America and also in the Belt and Road Initiative. Do you see any strengthening of these alliances between Russia, Iran, China, and perhaps other nations as this is happening?
Yeah, well, I mean, the ongoing, it's essentially an alliance now. I mean, the cat is out of the bag between Russia and China. Of course, they're not going to get involved in Ukraine themselves, but they have, given Russia the blessing, just as Russia is supporting China on Taiwan, with the U.S. supporting, separatist forces in Taiwan. Belarus would probably get involved because Belarus now has their own beefs with the regime in Kiev. That, this latest regime change attempt in Belarus was launched out of Ukraine to a large extent, and they ran this Ukrainian intelligence operation to try to disrupt their elections by luring Russian security contractors and telling Lukashenko there that they were there as Russians to overthrow the government. It created a little bit of turmoil there, but it was quickly discovered for what it was. But they've got their own beef, and I think that they may participate in this. But the NATO, Biden has said that U.S. troops would not be involved. And with some 10,000 NATO trainers and advisors just in the past few days, the UK and Canada have both sent more special forces into the country. Supposedly, they would be withdrawn if Russia does intervene. It would have to be an Afghanistan-style massive airlift and evacuation out of the country, getting the diplomatic personnel out and so on. It could be another fiasco. And there's so much possibility there for Americans to kill Russians or Russians to kill Americans if the U.S. is trying to get out of the country, to get thousands, but supposedly some 4,000 American military trainers and advisors on the ground out of that NATO 10,000. It could be a mess getting them out of the country in a hurry if Russia does launch a major intervention.
The last question I have about Ukraine, I think it's important because sometimes we have to look a little bit down the road. Zelensky, right? Some of our friends in independent media have kind of labeled Zelensky as a Western puppet of sorts. Is he that? Because I still remember the classic video of him trying to go talk to some of these militias to back off the people of the Donbass region and whatnot, and they were pretty much ignoring him. And the reason why I asked this question, Mark, is if Russia tries to make a regime change in Ukraine by the same token in which the United States helped Yeltsin get elected, and they try to win through the elections, in other words, try to find a candidate that's going to be Russian friendly, promote him, get him more votes, get him to actually win by way of democracy, you know what I'm saying? Will Zelensky threaten to kind of suspend the elections on behalf of the West and not allow this to move forward? Where do we stand is what I'm asking with Zelensky.
Yeah, the U.S. probably would have preferred, they liked Poroshenko over Zelensky, but Zelensky basically continued all of Poroshenko's policies and actually was harder on many issues than Poroshenko himself was. He became more nationalist than the guy who became the nationalist. And, you have to understand that all Ukrainian politics since 92 has always been and still is about the oligarchs that people owe their loyalty to. In Zelensky's case, this is Igor Kolomoisky, who owns Channel 5. He owned Private Bank and so on. And Zelensky has, basically rescinded Poroshenko's war on him. And he's now welcome back in the country. Instead, Zelensky is going after the oligarch Poroshenko and going after the oligarchs that back the forces of East Ukraine. It's oligarchs against oligarchs. That's still what's going on. And Zelensky, at the end of the day, I think he genuinely wanted peace at one point, but he found himself a captive of the regime that he inherited, which is kept in power by these far right, by these Banderite nationalists, both on the ground, the jackboots, but also ideologically. And he had to basically acclimate himself to them. And he's now as much a hostage to them as anyone else. I'm not saying he's a good guy, right? And, that he would change. But like Poroshenko, he has realized, what is necessary to keep this regime in power. And he has, accepted it. He has already, again, canceled elections in the regime-controlled parts of Donbass. He's silenced all the media outlets of East Ukraine. He's got both his political opponents now imprisoned on treason charges. He's a little dictator now. I mean, it's no joke. He's repressing in every way, shape, and form any criticism of his government, any the leaders of the two opposition parties. And his approval rating is showing it. It's 20-some%. The regime is teetering on the edge. And now with the infighting between him and Poroshenko going on in the courts, it's really a bad time to do that with the threat of a possible Russian intervention. And I think we could see some type of underground domestic attempt to overthrow the government, possibly from both sides, possibly from both the East and West Ukraine at the same time. And the whole house of cards could come crumbling down in the face of a Russian intervention.
FUBAR.
Yes, which is effed up beyond all recognition military acronym.
So there's actually bars named after that little saying, which is kind of funny. But we've been hearing what's happening in Kazakhstan, obviously from the Western media, that there's a revolution against a totalitarian government. However, if you look into the situation, you see a lot of the same regime change playbook, color revolution notes. What exactly is happening in Kazakhstan? And what reasons does the U.S. have to promote yet another color revolution in this region?
Okay, so Kazakhstan, Central Asian, it's a big country. It's 3 times the size of Texas, right? Only some 18, 19 million people, lots of natural resources, oil, gas, uranium. They produce half of the world's uranium at this point, lots of metals. They are not a poor country. Their GDP per capita is on a par with Russia's. There's always the same problems that we all have, whether it's the U.S. or Russia, UK, Kazakhstan, with inequality in the country. But the longstanding leader of the country since 92 stepped down in 2019. His, shall we say, bureaucratic, bookish, scholarly foreign minister, Kasim Jomart Tokayev, became president. One of the social domestic issues in the country was the price of basically gas for cars, except in Kazakhstan's case, the major fuel is liquefied petroleum gas, LPG. The problem is the government had a subsidization, price controls of this fuel for years, and the price it was being sold in the country was actually quite a degree lower than the production cost. And on top of that, a lot of black market developed on basically buying it up in the country and then selling it outside the country for a big markup, creating lots of shortage of the fuel that people needed to drive their cars. They removed the price controls, and over a year, prices kept creeping up. And when they reached double what they were a year ago, people got upset about it. They wanted the price controls back. So their protests developed starting in the west of the country, the least populated, where the oil and gas actually is. And these were very specific social protests on an issue. We want these price controls back. And we're talking protests of thousands, right? Not hundreds of thousands, not millions, right? Thousands of people, which, in Kazakhstan, that's already fairly significant. But these protests were almost immediately hijacked. And lots of Western experts who are no fans of Russia or so on have talked about this, like on Eurasian Net, Peter Leonard and so on, and they've acknowledged it. These protests were used as a cover by what was an armed insurrection attempt. And there were traitors within the government, and the head of the Kazakh intelligence services, the KNB, or the National Security Committee, Karim Masimov, he was one of the ones leading this. And he has since been arrested and charged with treason. They were violent. They were organized. They seized key government buildings, media outlets, train stations, airports, banks. And in the early days, there was lots of dead and injured police, and there was a real threat. They had a lot. They had thousands of people. According to the president, now there were some 20,000 trained on the ground, and obviously, this Masimov, he believed that he should have replaced Nazarbayev. He believed that he should have been the president. He's also good business friends with Hunter Biden, and there's pictures of them together, which I don't think, considering what happened in Ukraine, is kind of a redux version of there. I suspect, and both China and Russia have said that there was a color revolution attempt. That may have been the outside inference. We also saw a Kazakh oligarch in exile. This is Mukhtar Ablyazov, who, by the way, also funded the Tulip Revolution in nearby Kyrgyzstan back in 2005. He is wanted in Kazakhstan for major fraud and embezzlement, billions of dollars, and for killing his business rivals. He fled the country first to the UK, and he was too dirty even for the city of London. The UK charged him with fraud and embezzlement too. He fled to France, which for some reason gave him political asylum, including from the UK, I guess. And he is what Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, the U.S. State media outlet, has turned the Kazakh opposition, creating his Democratic Choice for Kazakhstan party. He was deeply involved in this. He, by his own admission, he set up a headquarters in Ukraine that he was operating out of, using the same people that had been involved in overthrowing the government there, the same lessons, the same playbook that they tried to apply to Kazakhstan without as much success there, particularly after the Collective Security Treaty Organization by Russia intervened to back up the Kazakh security forces. But he was deeply involved in this, and he's been again in the news in the last few days, talking about that he wants to overthrow the government in Kazakhstan, regime change, and he just needs more direct Western support. So it's pretty clear he was involved to some extent too. And if we take this oligarch in exile, a traitor linked with the Bidens, as the intelligence director, and these forces that they assembled on the ground, a lot of them Islamists. Kazakhstan is a Muslim majority country, and there is a restive Islamist minority, a more violent, Wahhabist influence out of Saudi Arabia that has resurgence its head. This all led up to this armed insurrection attempt that was put down. And it was put down by Kazakh security forces. The CSTO forces never engaged. There's no indication that the government ever fired on the protesters that these insurrectionists were using as a cover for their regime change attempt. There was a few bystanders caught, but the death toll is about 225. There was no mass firing on crowds or anything like that. But there were thousands of people injured, and at least half of those thousands are the police themselves. The CSTO forces, they never engaged. They just protected key government institutions and provided moral support, saying, to the Kazakh security and police forces that we got your back. And they've already left the country. They left the country just yesterday. That was the last foreign troops leaving. And now the president has announced major new social contract. He's purged the government of a lot of the old oligarchic elements, and he's basically creating a national social welfare fund where he intends to shake down all of the major privately owned corporations and wealthy individuals to start sharing the wealth around in what is amounting to a major wealth redistribution campaign to make sure that the people are on board with the government going forward.
That's going to be interesting. We're going to have to pay attention to that because the West is going to try to demonize that movement every single step of the way.
Who's the biggest foreign oil company in Kazakhstan? Chevron.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the CSTO, I believe it's called, those forces.
The Collective Security Treaty Organization, yes.
Can you give us a little insight to that? Because I know there were troops coming in from Belarus, from Russia, I believe Uzbekistan, and a couple other countries. So the Western media tried to take that and spin that as, look what Putin's doing. He's sending in troops now to Kazakhstan to cause problems. Why don't you explain about how that is kind of like that unity is formed and what their responsibilities are?
Yeah, we had Blinken, a very high degree of projection here, saying once Russians come into your country, it's very hard to get them out, right? Yeah. Hello, Syria, Iraq, Germany, Japan, anyway, the Collective Security Treaty Organization is a loose analog in Eurasia of NATO. It's led by Russia. They responded to the pleas from the Kazakh government. They sent some 2,500 lightly armed peacekeepers. Almost 2,000 of those were Russians. There were a few hundred Belarusians, some Tajiks, some Armenians. And what they did was they guarded key government buildings and institutions. Their rules of engagement was they don't engage with protesters. They don't engage with armed insurrectionists unless fired upon. And they didn't. They just provided some backup, making sure that the key government buildings were secured to free up Kazakh security forces to deal with their own security. They finished, and they're all already out of the country. And Blinken, if anyone actually, goes back and calls him on his comments, looks like a propagandistic fool again.
Well, I think that's all the questions I have, Pasta.
Yeah, I mean,
do you have any other questions?
Well, I mean, he kind of answered them, right? Like going forward, now we have a new kind of reformist kind of president there who's going to try to take some of the money away from the corporations and spread the wealth out. How are they going to deal with the uranium situation, though? I mean, you talked about one of the natural resources being uranium. Isn't the West going to, if it's half the uranium comes from Kazakhstan, isn't the West going to continue to try to get their claws on that and somehow get in there and get to that uranium? In other words, can we expect more actions from the West like we are seeing in Ukraine in Kazakhstan?
It's really hard for the U.S. and Kazakhstan because Kazakhstan, the only sea border they have is with the Caspian Sea, which is also, not connected to any of the major world oceans. It's effectively a big lake with a high saltwater content. And it's wedged in between China and Russia, right? It's very hard for the U.S. to do, what they do there. And I think the U.S. is afraid that if they continue to more overtly, meddle in Kazakh affairs, then the Kazakh government will nationalize all of the Western companies' oil assets in the country, and then they'll be completely out. I think it's actually the oil and gas that they're more interested in. And that oil and gas is not oil and gas that's going back to the U.S. It's, of course, oil that is being sold to China. And, for a nice markup. And the concern there is, control of China's oil supply. But the U.S. isn't the only foreign country involved in the energy industry there. Russia and China are also both involved there. And at the end of the day, they're dominant. And they do not compete with each other there very much. They have managed, through the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which Russia, China, and Kazakhstan are all also both a part of, to manage their influence and the development of Central Asia to help it out between them. And things have worked out pretty well there. China backed up the CSTO intervention, and they warned about, color revolutions. And they said it was unacceptable and Western meddling was unacceptable. So they seem to be on the same page here. I think that of all, Ukraine, borders Europe, so it's a different story. But Kazakhstan, they tried their best and it wasn't anywhere near good enough.
Another failed revolution, color revolution for the West. I mean, they've had a few failures lately. So I think the tide is definitely changing to more countries having bilateral relationships compared to the unilateral type of foreign policy that has dominated so many countries for so long.
Yeah, they're definitely the unipolar moment is over.
Yeah. And I don't see Russia and China back down. Like, you won't see a Russia in 2014 anymore. That's gone. We already see what's going on with Hong Kong and China. It's different days, and the United States needs to wake up and smell the coffee. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the senior analyst, foreign policy, Mark Sleboda for the Convo Couch. Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us. This was amazing information. I appreciate it.
It's always fun to be on with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Mark.
Hi, Mark.
You guys were awesome in Nicaragua.
Thank you.
You were watching me. I was watching you.
Yeah, it's true.
Thanks, Mark.
Bye.
Fam, you don't get that information on MSNBC and CNN. That's amazing. And even when it was great talking to Dan Kovalev too, but when it comes to that area, Mark is in there. He's got the know-how. This is how I got started in Ukraine in 2014, watching this guy right here. I'm so happy to have him on our show, fam, because he really brings the news and he brings it hardcore.
He does. He's absolutely great. And I was listening to a lot of analysis on this, and I found his to be the best. And just in Nicaragua, it's funny. We were all like, looking at what was happening, and Ben Norton was, giving his spiel about it, and we were all just talking about it. So I'm glad that it failed, because there's a lot of connections between the U.S. intelligence and those intelligence forces that were trying to start a color revolution. But fam, I know you wouldn't be surprised. A lot of the cappuccino communists and the shit libs were saying that the U.S. needs to stand behind the democracy of Kazakhstan. So it just goes to show you how they're so dumb. Yeah. We have some super rates, fam.
It's ridiculous, fam. They haven't known jack about foreign policy in God knows how long. They don't speak to the right people. They take their headlines right from MSNBC and CNN. Just look where the money's coming from, ladies and gentlemen. So can I do some super rates real quick?
Yes.
Oz, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to cue up Ungi's video and play it really quick. Get ready to play it. And let me let everybody know Ungi is matching today the Super Rays, ladies and gentlemen. We're trying to go to DC. Now that there's a lot of people here, let's play Ungi's video really quick one more time, guys. This is what our good friend Mike Ungi is doing for us to help us get to DC.
Greetings, all you conscientious connoisseurs of concisely convoluted conversation. It's your old friend Ungi, the blathering boomer, and I'm here to blather at you about sending the Convo Couch to report on this weekend's big rally in Washington, D.C., because these guys are second to none when it comes to honest reporting of an event. So I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is, and I will match the first $200 in donations given during today's podcast. So you Lapasori, hit that donate button and I'll be matching you. Let's send these guys to Washington.
That's our good friend Ungi, who's going to match up to $200 today, fam. So, ladies and gentlemen, you got $2, $5, $10, anything. Throw it on up there. We got a little help in the kitty today. And, fam, didn't you like the way he used the word Lapasori? He didn't say Lapasaurus. He called them Lapasori, meaning, many.
Yeah, he uses the proper terminology. So that's great, fam. It's more than I can say for you, fam. I don't know.
Well, fam, don't make fun of my English because I can't even speak it. Anthony, thank you for the Super Ray contribution. He says, I am one of Klaus Schwab's young global leaders. That's probably cracking on Tulsi and Dan Crenshaw right now, because a lot of people have been resurfacing their young global leaders pictures they had back in the days. And now you see Dan Crenshaw just getting yelled at by his constituents for not standing up for people at the Capitol for due process. Acting like he can't do anything. So please, Crone of Anarchy, U.S. government and corporate CIA media lie. Thank you, Crone of Anarchy. Then you have Ungi. Ungi matching $2 from Anthony. David Crow. Hail Crow. Wow. Actual analysis, not CIA stenography. Thanks, Ung. And then you have Ungi matching $5 from Crone of A. Then you have Rob McMurtry. Rob McMurtry, thank you for the Super Ray contribution. It is always appreciated on the couch, fam. That was for you. Ungi matching the Crone of A. Rob McMurtry, we talked about. Benny Massimo. Benny Massimo, we love you, brother. Stick around today. We're going to talk about some stuff, some things you might like. Ungi matched David Crows. He matched Rob M. He matched Benny. He matched Tom. Here's Tom Dickinson. Have Mark Sleboda on a lot. Fam, what do you think about that? He's been on the show more than anybody. But
I think
what
so.
do you think about
he was definitely. Yeah. So I mean, I don't mind having. I think he's great. I'm still waiting for my Russian hat though. We have some, but I always want more. So I'm a little bit salty. And he never sent the barbecue, or you never sent him the barbecue sauce.
Well,
So
I told him we'll have to visit him there. We'll have to go to Moscow.
We have to go to Moscow.
Yeah. That's what we're going to have to do. So one day we're going to have to do a GoFundMe from Moscow. Send the Convo Couch off to meet Mark Sleboda. Thomas Dickinson, thank you so much for that Super Rate contribution. Ungi matched that one. JVB says, brilliant. Mike matched JBV. Steve Stanley, thank you very much for the Super Rate contribution. It is always appreciated on the couch. And fam, here comes AREM dropping some knowledge. Midnight Oil, out where the river broke. The Bloodwood and the Desert Oak, Holden Rex and boiling diesel, steam in 45 degrees. The time has come to say fair's fair, to pay the rent, to pay our share. The time has come, a fact's a fact. It belongs to them. Let's bring it back. How can we dance when our earth is turning? How do we sleep while our beds are burning? Great song, AREM. Thank you so much. Yeah. I'm glad I knew the song, so therefore I could flow. Julia,
I know this song.
Yeah, it's How Do We Sleep While Our Heads Are Turning? Come on, Oz, with the overall. How do we sleep while our beds are burning? Julia Moretti, thank you so much. Says, I'll be there. Julia, we'll see you there. Come find us. Come look us up.
Yay.
The fam will be on the ground. Teresa Allen, thank you so much for the Super Rate contribution. It is always appreciated on the couch. Jim Garrison, we know he's the one who after Clay Shaw. 5S to the South, Convo Couch. AREM came in with another love. So Thomas Dickinson, go to Washington. Rob McMurtry, another one. So here comes Ungi. He's matching Steve S. He's going to start matching these people left and right. And once he matches that, fam, we will get a certain number. Remember, we can get that sucker up to 400 today because our good friend Ungi is going to match the first $200 today, ladies and gentlemen. And it really does help us out. You know, this is serious when I say this. We don't like coming and asking for money, guys. We hate it. We really do. It sucks when we have to say, hey, man, because we know everybody out there is struggling right now. We don't. The future's not certain right there, right? So we hate to do it. But we want to be able to counteract the narratives of what you see in the mainstream media, what you see in CNN, what you see in MSNBC and Fox, all these other channels. And the only way we can do it is when we put up and show up. So really, to tell you the truth, every time you guys help us out, whether it be the GoFundMes, whether it be our PayPals, our Patreons, we love you all. The Rokfiners today, it means the world to us. But we always will work so we won't let you down and make sure you bring you the information live with boots on the ground. No, fam?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's important to attend this because we're like going to be a few of a handful of people that we consider on the left, or anti-imperialists. First and foremost, I believe this is a form of imperialism. I've said that before. And there's many people that are going to be speaking that I think you guys are going to like. So we're gonna be there. We're gonna be covering it, and you'll be surprised that I think there's gonna be a lot more unity on this. There's obviously gonna be people on the right there that we don't agree with ideologically, but I think it's important to understand that what has happened here isn't a left-right paradigm, but a top-down paradigm, and people need to start understanding that. So that's what we're gonna go really try to get across over there.
Amen, fam. That is so true. People are trying to make this a left-right issue, and it is not. So we'll check back at the Super Rays after this section. We still have one more section. By the way, DC just jumped in there. Hey, Jimmy Dore did a segment on a possible Fed infiltrator on 1/6, and I shot them a super chat about the coverage. Y'all did that. Dude that posed as both a BLM activist and a Trump supporter, encouraging others to scale the wall on 1/6. His name was John Sullivan. Johnny did a little interview with him months before. We've had videos of him at these Black Lives Matter rallies where he was just cursing and demonizing the Trump Republicans and everything they stand for and the racism. And then he shows up at 1/6 now encouraging people. He also said, I have a knife, which was kind of something that I really was upset by because we had said we didn't see any weapons. Jason Burma saw one sledgehammer that was passed and handed over to the cops. So we've emphasized that we saw no weapons. And if anybody thinks that they were going to have an insurrection on the Capitol with patriots without any weapons, is surely sniffing some serious glue. So I'm glad Jimmy did a story about that. But Johnny caught him in the streets. Our good friend Corinne, she had done an interview with him. So this guy has been out and about. We don't know what he is, if he was just an instigator or if he was working with somebody. But there's a lot of questions about January 6th. And you don't get those questions on the mainstream media. Instead, you get Congress playing victims, fam. Let me just finish up that Super Ray. It says, can't remember his name. It was John Sullivan. But Steph wanted to get in touch with you all about that. I mentioned that on YouTube. I mentioned that YouTube removed those videos. They did. Some people copied them. If we'll reach out to Steph and see if we get that information from John Sullivan passed on over. That is his name. It is John Sullivan. Ungi has matched Teresa A. Ungi has matched Jim G. So Ungi's going to match. He's going through it right now. I think he's going to match one more Arem, one more Thomas Dickinson, one more Rob McMurtry. We might be getting up close to the $300 range. Fam, we still have room for $50 more, for at least about $65 more for Ungi to match. And I want to thank Ungi for supporting us. You want to get started on the next subject?
Yeah, let's get started with our friend Klaus Schwab and his people. We'll be back because we'll never stop. We'll be back. So guys, this is a really important subject. I have seen two people cover it, Steve, and then also Ryan Christian as well. So, but everybody else hasn't really been covering it. I know Glory put up a thread. I think I might have put some of that in here. So Klaus Schwab was at the World Economic Forum at Davos, and he introduced Xi Jinping. Now, before we get into Klaus Schwab, I want to put up Naftali Bennett. Naftali Bennett is, of course, the new leader of Israel, right? The new prime minister of Israel. And some of the things he said were extremely troubling, not just obviously from an anti-imperialist standpoint, but also from the global capitalist standpoint with technology and, of course, the defense. Now, let's listen to a couple of things he said. I wanted to put so much more, but I wanted to not spend all day and make it short. But do check out Glory's thread, because it's a thread that basically has pretty much most of what he said. So in this tweet, we're going to hear how he talks about the pandemic being all about data and the fusion of information technology with medical data, as if that's a good thing. So let's listen to what he says.
Using information technology with pandemics and medicine. The pandemic is all about data, information, and gleaning insights from that data. And for example, I was the first during the Omicron wave to shut the skies for a while, for a few weeks. I did that. I wanted to buy time and see what's happening in other countries, and then using their data, be able to form the correct policy. Now that we know that the Omicron is much less lethal than its predecessors, we developed a strategy that acknowledges that and allows Israel to continue operating, albeit at a lower pace for a few weeks. So I see one big area, the fusion of information technology and data and medical data in order to glean actionable insights. The second area I see is way beyond medicine. The world is going remote. This sort of event, having the Davos summit, through the internet was unheard of a few years ago, and now it's almost natural. That means that the world is going to depend more and more on remote working. This provides a huge opportunity for Israel, which is, we've sort of exhausted most of our talent to employ foreign employees from Eastern Europe, from India in our companies to a much easier extent. And finally, it means that the world, as the world becomes more dependent on remote methodology, it means that we're also going to be more vulnerable to cyber attacks, which means we need good cyber defense. And Israel has massively invested in cyber defense technologies. And I believe roughly half or almost half of the global investments in cyber companies over the past few years have been in Israel. So Israel has become a powerhouse in cyber defense.
Bam. Oh my God! Do you want to go first? Or do you want me to?
You go.
Make it simple and quick because I like to hear what you have to say on this, because in my mind I'm going. Well, first of all, it's not Omicron is not like its predecessors because it's not from its predecessors. It's a whole different strand. And if you're looking at data and information, you would know that. Too many people don't know that and they don't talk about that. That's why I am like at another level of being pissed off when it comes to this whole situation, because nobody's really talking where Omicron is coming from. Secondly, the fact that he's pushing this kind of like global agenda of like staying separated, working from home, like bringing in other people into the other countries, other cheap labor from other areas. It's just mind boggling. And I hope the people of Israel really kind of stand up for this. And, and then finally, when you tie together the whole like, data, it depends on which, where, and how you get your data from. You can use whatever data you want to manipulate anything, but he's openly talking about instructions and rules from Davos, fam. Like he's literally just laying it out on the table right now. At what point do we as citizens go, are they messing with us right now? Are they really screwing with us that much that they're giving us this much information, putting this stuff on paper in front of us? Do they want us to hear this information? What do they want to happen over here? It's ridiculous. And you know damn well, fam, the West, they might have moved your boy Netanyahu, but they're not going to replace him with somebody who's not going to play ball. This guy is going to play ball. He's continued to play ball. He's just another globalist. And Israel's going to have to take care of themselves. The citizens of Israel is going to have to realize what's going on.
Right. By all accounts, Bennett is worse, actually, even than Netanyahu. So in terms of what really worried me is Israel has been positioning itself with the help of the United States and the West, of course, as being extremely involved in defense, surveillance, and technologies within those industries. So they're just basically reiterating that they're going to be extremely involved in that, and they're going to be there for when perhaps we or somebody within our vicinity experiences a cyber attack where, let's say, we would all lose the internet. Well, we just rely on Israel. Israel, remember, has the cloud access. They have so much money invested in this and so much power that they're basically positioning themselves as a co-partner with the U.S. intelligence when it comes to, I think, surveillance. And when he talks about remote, how this pandemic has opened opportunities for people to work remotely, the reason they say this blatantly is because they paint it as this is something good. The whole thing on Davos since 2016 and on even before that has been about making things easier, making us closer together via the internet. But really what this pandemic has been doing is driving people apart and using the virtual world to replace those human connections. And so what we're seeing is a reiteration and a re-emphasis of that in those terms, because you're seeing them hyper focus on, oh yes, you can remote learn, remote work, and it's going to be cool and it's going to be that. But really, when you do that, you lose a human to human interaction. And so they're really pushing this whole thing where people aren't going to be physically connected. And this is also why they're doing it online, because of the quote unquote pandemic. So they're kind of just letting you know what's to come. And I also just wanted to share this second video.
Because I forgot to say it. Just something else that's really important to pay attention to. They're now telling you who the new enemy is: hackers. Okay, that's code for you, the people out there. Like they call Julian Assange like a hacker. They're saying that he encouraged Chelsea Manning to hack into information and send it. That's what they're doing. Even in Hollywood, me and Steve talked about this on his morning show the other day. They're making movies like this where different aspects of the CIA and intelligence agencies around the globe, like China, there was like a U.S., a British one, and a Chinese spy, a Colombian spy. You know, they all are joining together to fight the great threat now, which is not nation states. Now it's hackers, just human beings trying to find information and get it out to we the people. That's who the new enemy is now, ladies and gentlemen. It's you. That's what they're, because by any means they can make anybody a hacker. Look what they're saying about Julian Assange. This is the new enemy. This is what I'm saying, that the intelligence communities and the oligarchs have run wild, and they are now making us the enemy.
I 100% agree. Absolutely. And then this next one is just a shorter video about how they're talking about Palestine. Now, notice how they refer to Palestinians. And this one is, of course, I think is going to get a lot of people up in arms. He talks about helping Palestinians, but also deems them terrorists. So let's just hear what he says.
Through business, through economy, through jobs, it's the most sustainable way to bring stability. I'm promoting and support industrial zones, joint industrial zones, Palestinian Israelis, allowing Palestinians to work in the very advanced Israeli high-tech sector, increasing trade between Jordan and the PA. So basically, my approach is all in on economy. At the same time, though, we have to be cognizant of the fact that there's always a meaningful terror threat from the Palestinians to Israel. We've seen it time and again, even in the past few weeks. We've had some terror events. So I want to be very clear about that. I will not do anything that could hinder or threaten Israel's security or weaken our ability to defend ourselves by ourselves. Ultimately, the Palestinians have a big choice to make, whether they want to go down the path of terror or the path of peace and prosperity. Ultimately, that's their choice to make. I just want them to know that we here are very positive about prosperity and people-to-people peace.
Fam, they got choices, right. Fam. They got choices, fam, right? You could stay there and be bombed and be happy with it, or you can get even more jumpier, and we'll use more advanced technology to bomb the shit out of you, fam.
Right. And so again, they're saying he's telling people he's going to welcome Palestinians into this sector. Again, this sector is working for who? This sector is going to work for intelligence, for the surveillance state. And of course, you know, this is Israel, but Israel wouldn't be Israel without the US. And so when you hear these things, these words come out of his mouth, and then of course saying, well, Palestinians we're going to defend ourselves without any regard to be how Palestinians are treated right now in an open air prison where they're constantly terrorized. They don't have access to water. They live in a very disastrous state of very little humanity. And they don't, there's no mention of that. Right. And then you just see them being used. Here are the opportunities that you have to contribute to the empire. or that's your choice, right? If you want to contribute to the empire. So once again, reiterating this intelligence. And then he goes on to say, I'm not going to play the video, but he goes on to call Iran and the octopus of terror and instability, which is hilarious because what is the West? What is Israel? What is the United States that have constantly bombed, droned, and sanctioned these nations in Central and West Asia? So it's just one gigantic gaslight that we're hearing from this guy. But this isn't even the worst of what we're gonna hear of what from these people. But yeah.
Can I say this much too, that when it comes to the Western presidents, when it comes to the United States president, every single president has just handed off like a baton, once again, like running a relay race from where the last president was. You know, everybody's been, Joe Biden, I am a Zionist, remember? If it wasn't in Israel, we had to create one. And Donald Trump was just Israel's bitch, ladies and gentlemen, just did whatever for them. So that's why we're here at this state right now. And there's a lot of conservatives out there, a lot of patriots now who kind of have the same kind of feelings towards the Palestinian because of the mainstream media, because of the government, because of that same narrative that it's the Israelis that are under attack from the Palestinians and not vice versa. You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
Look, I know a lot of people when they talk about the situation, some people are like, they want to like, oh, they don't want to recognize Israel. They don't want to do ever. All I care about right now more than anything is that the bombing and the killing stops. Stop, and fix the Gaza situation. Stop with this whole situation where you're starving these people you're keeping them from water and everything else. This is not hidden anymore. Everybody knows this now, right? Enough is enough. Moving forward, let's find a peaceful resolution. That's what I want more than anything. And we're not even acknowledging that the Palestinians are the victims here. They are.
So fam, just moving right along into the next speaker, Klaus Schwab, our good friend, the son of a Nazi. He is, of course, the one behind, Klaus. He is the son of a Nazi. And I say that not lightly. I say that because some people think that he's a good guy. Some people are even saying, well, he might not be as bad. He's bringing in Xi Jinping. Now, we are obviously anti-imperialist. Every time the U.S. tries to foment some sort of manufacture consent to attack China in some ways, or even from the right where they say, oh, the Chinese virus and all these things, we don't condone that. We haven't seen China be an empire quite yet. They are a superpower, right? But they're not necessarily an empire. They don't have military bases all over the world like we do. Their relationship with other nations seems to be one of cooperation. Thus far, not all, from what we know, but the vast majority, at least in Latin America with Bolivia, they helped a lot of Bolivia redo their infrastructure, get infrastructure for the first time. So it's some of these things have been happening. Now, am I suspect of a lot of centralized power? Absolutely, 100%. It's something you should always watch. You can both criticize or be vigilant about the power China has and is increasing, but also say they've gotten their people out of poverty. They've largely been able to create a population that has money to spend. So I think there's a lot of nuance to this situation, and I think we would be hypocritical if we didn't talk about this. Does it worry me that Klaus Schwab's invited the CCP General Secretary Xi Jinping as a keynote speaker and that he accepted? Yes, it does, because this summit pretty much to me is a summit of global capitalism, of people that are going to try to privatize everything for the 1% predator class. If China's motto has been to eradicate poverty, is this somehow like going really in line with your principles? Maybe at the surface. But what you really have to understand is these people are not on your side. Now, let's listen to what Klaus Schwab said when he introduced CCP General Xi Jinping.
China has made significant economic and social achievements under your leadership. In the first 3 quarters of 2021, China's economy grew by over 9%. You have achieved a historic goal to become a moderately prosperous society in all respects. Mr. President, I strongly echo your remarks in 2017 that mankind has made progress by surmounting difficulties, and when encountering difficulties, we should join hands and rise to the challenge. I believe this is the best time for leaders to come together and work jointly for the world to become more inclusive, more sustainable, and more prosperous. We now welcome His Excellency Xi Jinping, President of the People's Republic of China.
尊敬的施瓦部主席
Professor Klaus Schwab, ladies and gentlemen, friends, greetings to you all. It is my pleasure to attend this virtual session of the World Economic Forum. In 2 weeks' time, China will celebrate the advent of spring in the Lunar New Year, the Year of the Tiger. In Chinese culture, tiger symbolizes bravery and strength, as the Chinese people often refer to spirited dragon and dynamic tiger, or soaring dragon and leaping tiger. To meet the severe challenges facing humanity, we must add wings to the tiger and act with the courage and strength of the tiger to overcome all obstacles on our way forward. We must do everything necessary to clear the shadow of the pandemic and boost economic and social recovery and development, so that the sunshine of hope may light up the future of humanity.
Bam. Be careful what you say after this, because you're going to piss off Danny Haiphong, Carl Zah, and Ben Rubenstein. And, it's funny because I think you've gotten a lot of criticism on the other end. And we remember this stuff. Remember a couple years ago when I was talking about China and people were like, Pasta, you can't have the Convo Couch in China, because we had this kind of like militaristic kind of enemy view of what China is, right? It wasn't really talked about. A lot of people didn't understand China. I think, though, right now, what we're trying to do is find a common ground in between, because we pointed this out. Pointed this out on Steve's show the other day. You mentioned all these things that China was able to accomplish, from removing people from poverty, the fact that they don't go around with a missile, they go around with a checkbook instead. However, this has got to be a little concerning when you see Xi Jinping walking arm in arm with Klaus Schwab, no?
Right. So in my opinion, there is a lot of nuance to the situation. I don't think it's as cut and dry as if you see somebody there, specifically a world power. I see people like Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum. They understand what's happening here. They know what time it is. China is having the upper hand now. You can't ignore them. The West can no longer ignore China. We're shifting into an era, as Mark just said, a bipolar era, bilateral era. We're not anymore under the unilateral type of Western dominated era. That is no longer the case. And the United States knows it, the West knows it, Klaus Schwab knows it. So I think this is in an effort to entice the East and entice China, because it's not like we don't know that China is diametrically opposed to the United States right now, in terms of empire, in terms of imperialism, in terms of their political ideologies, right? However, by the same token, China is also going to, I think, because they are an increasing superpower, and because they do still have a class difference within China. I mean, you still have a hierarchical type of structure in terms of the political dominance of Xi Jinping and certain emperors. That's always been part of the culture, though. That's part of who China has been for centuries. So that's nothing new. So you have this whole, I think, from Xi Jinping, I think they are proceeding with caution. I don't necessarily know the intricacies within what's happening behind closed doors in China, but I do know that they're a largely collective type of nation where these people tend to believe in the government. They tend to rely on what their government does and says, but there's also diplomacy at the helm. So there will be times when you see, we had Juan Orlando Hernandez at the inauguration for Daniel Ortega. Like when we were there, and Johnny was like, why is Juan Orlando Hernandez there? Oh, because he's still the president of Honduras until Zomar's inauguration on the 27th, and they want to open a relationship between Honduras and Nicaragua. So while Juan Orlando Hernandez was there, and he wasn't well liked by a lot of the people from Honduras who were there to view this inauguration, while he's absolutely one of the most hated individuals in Central America, they were like, well, it's diplomacy. They're trying to get something done. They need the approval of Honduras, so they're doing it. We don't like it, but that's what it is. So I think there's a little bit of that playing at both sides. I think it's something that we should watch, specifically us in independent media, people who are, we're understanding that people like Klaus Schwab and these 1% billionaires, at the end of the day, this is a class issue. Perhaps the classes of these nation states have far more in common than we do. Just because China as a whole has lifted people out of poverty doesn't mean that there aren't politicians there that need to
or oligarchs
protect their own interests. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I feel like they have their own oligarchs. I feel that Steve said it best. This isn't about nation states. And it's funny, I had an argument, a little debate with a friend of mine about them trying to blame the Wuhan virus on China. Like this was China who let out a weapon. Like, no, this isn't about nation states anymore. Just follow the money, just follow the chains. And you can see that, Eco Alliance Health and, Fauci and other entities have been doing this gain of function testing with Western funding for a long, long time. You look at the ties with DARPA, everything that's involved. This isn't, in my mind, about nation states. And same with the same thing over here. This is about oligarchs and elites all over the globe trying to run things together. And I think you're right. Like the people of these nation states, people in the United States, the everyday people in China, you know what I'm saying? And like you said, I think the reason why they've been so willing to go along with things is because the Chinese government has lifted a lot of people out of poverty and given them a living. Listen, nowadays, where it used to be where Nike and Under Armour used to go into countries like China and have factories, they're moving out because the Chinese worker is now making way more and too much to save that money for cheap labor. They're moving into Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia to make these particular types of materials or products because the level of income has risen in China too fast for the United States. So it's just something to keep an eye on. But when you see it coming out of the World Economic Forum, you got to be very cautious of it. And I also don't want to piss up Caleb too, because I know Caleb's a big fan of Xi Jinping, but there are a lot of suspicious things going on, especially when he's going hand in hand with Klaus Schwab. Fam, go ahead and continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, and you're right. And the pandemic as well. I mean, their response to the pandemic was far better than ours, but also their ideology and the way people behave and the way people feel about their government is also entirely different. So when people say, well, we could have done what China did, no, you couldn't have, because we're an entirely different country. We have a completely different political climate right now. People aren't being lifted out of poverty. They're being driven into poverty. So you have these, oppositions, and then you have the issue of class, Pasta. And at the end of the day, and I've said it many times, these politicians are going to be politicians first. These politicians are going to take care of their interests. And if they belong to a certain class of the 1%, they're going to take care of that. Now, it depends on how much of the individuals, the working class of these states, of these nation states see it. But we see it because we're not experiencing any of these sort of gains in terms of it. And the people who are victims of our imperialism, they see it because they have no choice, because they're experiencing the results of resource extraction and deprivation and sanctions. So I think it's something that we should watch. I think it's something to be critical of. I also think that it's kind of, for me, it's just class, right? At the end of the day, am I going to be a fan of Xi Jinping? No, I'm not. I've never been a fan of like any of these. I mean, how do you trust them, right? How do you trust any one particular politician? The only thing you can look at is what they have done for their people. And that's what I look at when I look at China. People are being lifted out of poverty. They do have money. Do they have a social credit score? Yeah. Would I necessarily want to live in a country that has a centralized power like that? No. This is why I like countries like Nicaragua that respect a more decentralized structure, that have autonomous regions where people can, have their own co-ops and do their own thing. And I would rather be in countries like that than in countries with centralized power. But that's just me. I mean, if people want to live in China and love China and are happy with the government, that's up to them. I'm not here to impose my own beliefs, my own ideology on other people. And I think so many people do that from both ends of the spectrum. So
how different are we in the West, though, too? Like, we don't have a social credit score. We have a financial credit score. Like, you can't do anything unless they take how much are you worth, dollars and cents? It's not that different. It's not that far off. It's a different type of good playing citizen. And also, to the way that China did handle the pandemic, that's something that's going to leave the door open for a lot of people to trust their government, because they handled it in a better way. They did have a big, crazy authoritarian lockdown, but they actually used therapeutics and saved people's lives. That's the big difference in China from what we saw over here, where it was just a mass ball of confusion, and wherever we're at right now. I don't want to speak too much.
Yeah, and they don't view it as authoritarian. The vast majority of people there don't view it as authoritarian. They view it as a collectivist thing you do because it was necessary, and they trust their government. We don't. So this person, I wanted to point out what they said because I thought it was relevant. They said, China working with the World Economic Forum and the WHO and taking them seriously is like Russia trying to work with NATO. the people calling the shots at the WEF are enemies to China. They just want access to China's money and their 1.4 billion person market. What I mentioned earlier is that I do think they see the writing on the wall. I think they see that China is up on the up while we're on the down. And so they're trying to play nice with China to get access to this money. And I do think profit and access and power is always a motive. So just on that. And Fam,
I disagree with this here, right here. I don't know necessarily if that's true, whatnot. It's not like Russia trying to work with NATO, because they are working together. They're talking hand in hand, like they're working hand in hand. So we don't know for sure if that is necessarily the situation. I know what this person's saying, but we also have to look at the way James Corbett wrote about this when you talked about Henry Kissinger back in the days, how they brought China into the fold and where Mao had some of his schooling from, you know what I'm saying? So let's not think that this is 100 necessarily true. I don't necessarily believe what this gentleman just said. However, you know, it is food for thought. Just want to point that out.
Yeah. I think there's definitely a for-profit motive, though, perhaps on both ends, especially on the World Economic Forum's end, though. I think they see that the power that China is gaining every single day. So that's what I agree with. So here's Fauci. He's your favorite. So he was there and he said a few words about disinformation. Let's listen to what he said.
You know, one of the things that I believe the entire world is facing, but we certainly are facing it in a very, very disconcerting way in the United States, is the amount of disinformation that is accompanying what should be a problem where everyone pulls together against the common enemy, which is the virus. We have disinformation that is entirely destructive to a comprehensive public health endeavor.
Yeah. So
I'm about to lose my lunch over here. This is disgusting. Go ahead. I mean,
no, we can discuss more on Rokfin only.
Yeah.
But this sort of thing that he's doing is, of course, playing right in line with the World Economic Forum. Because quickly, I want to go through a couple of really, really worrisome things that there. So this is I think she is the executive director of the Ethereum Foundation. She's also at the World Economic Forum. And you can see she's Aya Miyaguchi and Vitalik Buterin, the co-founder of Ethereum, both at the World Economic Forum. So fam, I don't know, talk to your Bitcoiners. Not a good look for.
Don't get too confused, because one of them staying at proof of work. Ethereum is moving to proof of stake, right? So they're moving away from the fact that the miners can control the whole system and bringing it into more centralized a kind of a sphere, and that is a cause for concern. That's why at the end of the day that we always say Bitcoin is king, because it's completely decentralized, where they're trying to make Ethereum centralized, and that is a big problem and something we have to look for down the road. I don't want to bite the hand that feeds me over here, but that is a cause for concern, the fact that they're at the World Economic Forum.
Right, and then you have this comment by the by Vitalik Buterin, the co-founder of Ethereum, where they were talking about somebody who said we should be investing in technology that makes having kids much faster, easier, cheaper, more accessible, synthetic wombs. And somebody said this is an awful idea. Synthetic wombs for what? Why take on the risks? And he says disparities in economic success between men and women are far larger once marriage children enter the picture. Synthetic wombs would remove the high burden of pregnancy, significantly reducing inequality. I think a lot of people are going to have moral and ethical concerns with that. It's a little bit like the transhumanism that the World Economic Forum has been advocating for. So no surprise that these people are there. I just wanted to point that out. Now, this is kind of, we've kind of talked about this, but I think it's worth repeating, especially in the context of what we just saw, some of the things we saw at the World Economic Forum of this year. This is how they have framed the pandemic. This is what they say: never let a crisis go to waste. And they kind of talk about just a more surveilled type of state. Let's watch the video.
fam, what pandemic era changes will be permanent? You know, like you talked about, never take advantage, never lose the opportunity to take advantage of a good disaster or a good crisis. It's, well, at what point are you now causing the crisis because you take advantage of the other crises so much? Well, why don't you just start causing your own crisis so you can kind of steer the world in whatever direction you want? It's obvious at this point that they want to keep us separate, keep away from each other.
Yeah, so from the onset of this pandemic, many of us said that this pandemic was just a Trojan horse for the more surveillance state, just like it's been with every other issue from 9/11 to January 6th to now. And so what we're seeing is them telling you straight up that, yes, some of these measures that you thought you were going to go back to normal, that you were just doing this because you wanted to get your freedom back, whatever the case may be, some of these things are never going to come back. And they're flat out telling you, but they're making it seem like it's your choice. And that is a very, very clear sign of intelligence type of formulations and algorithms, because they make you choose and demand these measures, just like, you know, what we see on the US left demanding lockdowns, right? Demanding mandates, demanding separations and segregations, things they never would have demanded had they not been made to believe that they wanted these things. And so what we're seeing is the push to, as Pasta just said, separate people, but under the guise of, this is great, look how easy and accessible we're making this. It's once again that whole accessibility thing, right? When they put this accessibility, they're like, this is so accessible, this is great. You don't even need a facial recognition, it's gonna be your heartbeat now. So your heartbeat, like, does that not worry anybody that you can like be identified via your heartbeat? So you'd have to be dead to like perhaps get some privacy. I mean, I don't think we're going to win the battle against technology, but technology right now is on the hands of very, 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 very evil people and a very corrupt oligarchy. So how am I going to be comfortable with that? And it's just really scary that more people have believed that this is some sort of conspiracy. There are literal videos we just showed you of people saying these things, and you can pretend that it's something good and favorable to the working class when a bunch of billionaires get together and a lot of people with power get together and they're deciding things. You can pretend that it's in your best interest, or you can be a realist, a real person living in the real world, and see that it has never been that way and it will never be that way, because you are disposable and you are only necessary to what you can produce in this society. And so,
then
yeah,
what
I don't know if you have anything more.
Recognize it. What then next?
Right, right.
Mm.
So, and you know, this gets further weird because I found this. This person said that they deleted this article that they had put up in 2017. Welcome to 2030. This is about Agenda 2030. This is a real thing that the World Economic Forum put out. I know this has been framed. This is a real thing they put out. They put out this article. It was everywhere. And they said, I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better. And I have my theory about why they're doing this. But they put out this article, then they deleted it because they got so much backlash. And if you go on the link and you click on it, you'll get this. Sorry, but we can't find the page you were looking for anymore. So if you go on the link from the World Economic Forum, they deleted it. But if you go back to the Wayback Machine and you see it, you can see that it was there. And of course, that was deleted recently, by the way. So what I did was found the article in another medium, the Forbes, and I'm going to read some of this article because if you guys are going to freak out when I read this article, right? So I'm just going to read a little bit of it. And let me just, there's like an ad here. Hold on. Okay. So they say, welcome to the year 2030. Welcome to my city, or should I say our city? I don't own anything. I don't own a car. I don't own a house. I don't own any appliances or any clothes. It might seem odd to you, but it makes perfect sense. Everything you considered a product has now become a service. We have access to transportation, accommodation, food, all the things we need. One by one, all those things became free, so it ended up not making sense for us to own much. Communication became digitized and free, energy free. Things started to move quickly. Transportation dropped dramatically in price. It made no sense for us to own cars. We could call a driverless vehicle or a flying car for longer journeys immediately. Public transport, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes I use my bike. I enjoy exercise on the bike, blah, blah, blah. And then they talk about we don't pay any rent. Someone else is using our free space whenever we do not need it. My living room is used for business meetings when I am not there. Once in a while, I will choose to cook for myself. It is easy. The necessary kitchen equipment is delivered at my door within minutes. Since transport became free, we stopped having all those things stuffed into our home. Why keep a pasta maker and a crepe cooker crammed into our cupboards when we can just order them when we need them? And so blah, blah, blah. The economy is easier. And so he goes on to talk about shopping. We don't need shopping. And then they later on in the paragraph, they said when AI and robots took over much of our work, we suddenly had time to eat well, sleep well, and spend time with other people. The concept of rush hour makes no sense anymore, since the work we can do can be done at any time. I don't really know if I would call it work anymore. It's more like thinking time, creation time, and development time. For a while, everything was turned into entertainment and people did not want to bother themselves with difficult issues. It was only at the last minute that we found out how to use all these new technologies for better purposes than just killing time. Okay. And this last paragraph that I wanted to read, my biggest concern is that all people who do not live in our city, those we lost on the way, those who decided that it became too much, all this technology, those who felt obsolete and useless when robots and AI took over big parts of our jobs, those who got upset with the political system and turned against it. They live different kinds of lives outside the city. Some have formed little self-supplying communities. Others just stayed in the empty and abandoned houses in small 19th century villages. Once in a while, I get annoyed about the fact that I have no real privacy, nowhere I can go and not be registered. I know that somewhere everything I do, think, and dream is recorded. I just hope that nobody will use it against me. All in all, it is a good life. Okay, so I want to hear your reaction, and I invite everybody to read that. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and put it in the chat right now, this link, so you guys can read it, because it is very, to me, this is extremely frightening. And it's extremely gaslighting.
I like to look at the nuance of it, right? Like the psychology of it. And it really starts to me when they talk about a pasta maker, right? Not because my name is Pasta, but obviously, you know, you guys have seen pictures of me before. You know, we've had friends come over and make pasta. You know, there's a reason why, you know, Italians get together and they make pasta, whatnot. It's a form of family. It's a form of community. It's a form of doing something together with your hands, just simple stuff, loving, whatnot. It's a connection, really, to tell you the truth. You know, our good friend Mikey's Treasure says, any place that has fresh pasta, I'll go there and eat, right? Because it comes from the heart. It seems like they're trying to dehumanize us, right? We talk about the transhumanism of things, you know, the mixing AI with humans of sorts together, and that is what's coming. You know, why do this when you can have it sent right to you, when you can have it brought right to you and stuff? So, I mean, I just look at this and the nuance, and when you have these articles out here, this is very similar to what we were reading the other day when it came to the lockstep documentation, right? Almost planning out 11 years before it happened what happened. And really, to tell you the truth, fam, this is where I kind of get stuck, right? Because I don't know what the solution is. The other day on the Union of the Unwanted, I said I'm losing hope because it seems like they have us, the majority, the masses, hypnotized, you know, right? They kind of like pushed in the direction where it's just somewhat inhuman, and people are accepting it. There are so many sheep in the flock that you're just following. Even watching some of our old progressive friends nowadays, the way they've been talking about this whole situation, it's mind-blowing because they're so willing to just fall in line with the masses and follow the lead of big technology and big power. So when things like this are written, it becomes quite frightening. And I don't know what the solution is, but I know what I'm going to do. And then I'm going to love and live life every step of the way. I'm not going to take the simple things for granted anymore. The times with the family, the times together, the emotions. I'm going to make sure that I enjoy the journey just as much as the end results when we get there. And that is important as humans, because we should be pushing against this type of kind of plan And that's what it is. This is a plan to get humans to a certain directions. Some of us really honestly believe that there is a predator ruling class that doesn't care about us, that doesn't want us here anymore, that we're a pain in the ass, we're extra mouths to feed. So it's how we treat each other as humans and what we decide to do moving forward that's going to be the most important thing. And that is not let go of those simple things in life. You know what I'm saying? I hate to sound like a fairy tale over here, fam, but love will conquer all. You know, humans are meant to get together, socialize, and be community. And that's what we need to do again. Be community. You know, resist the urge to have everything just done in your own bubble by yourself, you know, to stay at home and never kind of mix with other humans. That's what we need to resist more than anything.
This is a very, I think, Orwellian situation that we're seeing. And what everything that I read there, right, is every right-winger's fear of what they're going to call communism. They're going to say, that's communism. That's what the left wants. They want, and this is by design. So what the intelligence community, the intelligence apparatus has done is they have taken fascism and rebranded it for a new era of idiots, these idiots that are on Twitch and these bots and these type and the younger generation, into calling it, you know, this new ability to come together and make it easier and accessible. So they've rebranded it, and they know that people on the right are gonna say that's communism, so that people are gonna hate any idea of socialism, of collective living, and they're gonna equate that to fascism. Because when you hear about communism from a lot of people who hate it, you say, oh, you don't own any property, you just everything's free and all this stuff. But that's not what communism isn't supposed to be, that you all are exactly the same, you don't have individual thought, that you just do what somebody tells you to do, and that you're entirely dependent on the government. No, the whole goal is a stateless society where you're free and you have abundance, and you're a free person. You have your own thoughts, but you live in a community where you can just let people be. That's the whole goal. It's a sort of utopian goal that, for obvious reasons, hasn't been accomplished. But at the same time, it's being catered to this lockdown left as this is what we want. We want, right? Oh, we want free transportation. Of course we do. We want healthcare. Of course you do. You don't want to pay rent. Of course you don't. But what happens is when you achieve that, when you get that under a surveillance state, when you get that under an oligarchy, you don't have what you think you're going to get. What you have is fascism. You have a totalitarian state that you're entirely dependent on. They give you all of these things as long as you play by their rules, as long as you do not dissent, as long as you think like within the narrative that they want you to think. That's not communism. That's not socialism. That's fascism. That is living in a totalitarian state. And so the intelligence community, which always thinks about 5 or 6 steps ahead of everybody else, has understood that the opposition to the current system is so great that they have to rebrand it to make you fall in love with more surveillance and more authoritarianism. And it's working wonders in the United States and a lot of the West of Europe. So that's exactly what that is, because they're going to frame it as, well, we want free public transportation. We want all of this. But think about the fact of what just Pasta said. They want us separated. The whole point of cooking, the whole point of being able to go to school, to being able to work and get out of your house is to have human-to-human contact interactions. We're a social creature. We're not supposed to be separated into complete little boxes and not have human interaction. That's why there's so many people with mental health issues, because of the way the system is. So they're saying that you're basically going to like this situation because you're going to have everything and you're not going to complain. But it's a very dark mirror, very Orwellian way to live, because you're not going to be creating or having interactions with anybody but yourself, and you're going to have to do what you're told, because the moment you don't, you're not going to have access to these things. And also notice how they framed the people that didn't want to be a part of this society. Oh, they're out there. We lost some people. They turned against the government. So, forget those people. We're here. Overall life is better. I've read countless of post-apocalyptic books because that was my favorite genre when I was growing up, and I studied obviously English literature. And one of the things I see right now with the world we're living in is that in one of the books that I read from a long time ago, The Giver, it was one of the first books I read when I was like in elementary school, and it's about a society where people live and it's all in black and white, and everybody is told who they're going to be when they grow up. Like you're told you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a teacher, you're going to be this, you're going to be a birth mother, you're going to be like, you have no choice, right? And the moment you can't listen to music doesn't exist. It's all these things. And you're supposed to have a family pod. It's not your real parents because there's birth mothers there. And so the moment a person starts to have dissent, that person is threatening the whole society and everything. We used to have hate. We used to have war. We used to have this and that. We don't have it anymore. But at what cost? At what cost are you having that? At what cost? At the cost of not having free thought, at the cost of not being able to have dissent, at the cost of having your entire existence controlled and surveilled. And that is not a positive. That is an apocalyptic, post-awful, Orwellian, whatever situation. And it's something we should be mindful of. And it's not at all a conspiracy. They're telling you right now, that's where we're headed.
We need to have more conversations about this. We have to do shows in the future about this, because one of the things that's always talked about, why a lot of people are not crazy about any Marxism or Marxist theory, is the fact that they would say that it's too much centralized power that wants to eliminate anybody who thinks differently than them. They want to eliminate the bourgeoisie. They want to eliminate the synthetic parties. And that's like an argument that people have within the whole communist, socialism, capitalist debate, right? Like capitalism is supposed to lead to choices where you don't get those choices with communists. And that's why I always like when you talk about these things, because you describe yourself as an anarcho-communist, and that means like pretty much no government with commune society. And I've always said before, in the past, that's why we need to have somewhat of a mixed economy of sorts. There is kind of a debate there. Marxism is also about getting rid of a system that doesn't work, that constantly has failed. There's a lot of people who are scared about that, getting rid of that system that doesn't work, that has failed, because it has worked for some people, and people are holding on to what they believe are assets and money, whatnot, and they figure that it's all going to be just washed away and going to the general public. But I mean, there is discussions for that, because it's something that Steve said the other day when I said, well, that's not really what it's about. For me, when I look at any type of Marxist theory, when I look at socialism and communism, it's about seizing the means of production, right? It's about the workers getting there, right? The proletariat making sure that they get their due so they have more power, and not just people who are sitting up the boards, a small amount of people deciding what's best for a large amount of people. But that's where even Steve says, well, that's the hook. You know what I'm saying? And Shadow Band Refugee, I know he's got a lot of words to say about this, about Stalinism, about centralized power. So this debate kind of will continue to move on. I'm glad we're starting to have these debates. We have to continue to figure out what's what, because we are in a different state right now, right? The technocratic boom has changed everything. That when you talked about Marxist theories years ago, well, the technocratic boom changes a lot of what we have to do moving forward. We have to make sure that there's not too much centralized power that's going to control us. And at the same time, make sure that we understand that there has to be a floor. Somehow there has to be a level. When John asked us that day when we were talking, when we were in Honduras, well, what system works best? I said, any type of system that we can make and we can build together that will reduce the suffering of people around the world. There's too much suffering. That's what we want at the end of the day, is to see less people suffering, see less people homeless, see less people dying of lack of health care, less people dying around the world of water and food. That is what we want. We have to figure out a way to work towards that society. And we have to see what's in front of us, because we are clearly getting duped from time to time, fam.
Yeah, absolutely, fam. We can move on to the Super A's, because we do have one more section. I could talk about this forever. So
I know we can go on for hours. We're praising Mikey Angelita. We did it, buddy. He's matched it up there, guys. We have $413 in tips today, guys. Woo! Bravo. That by the time half the show was done. Guys, this is for our fund runner for DC. It's still going up. If you continue to make it go up, we'll still love you guys. But even if we stop right there, that's great. But thank you so much, because every dollar does help. DC is not cheap. It's expensive for a reason. Fam, Shadowban Refugee says, Ukraine has been the battleground of empires for over 1,000 years. The Black Earth can feed the world because the world has fed the Black Earth. Nestor Manco is a genuine hero of mine. Death to all who stand in the way of freedom for the working people, something we were just talking about. And platformism isn't too bad at all. Plus, the red and white army couldn't burn the that black flag. Gets chased off abroad, fam. Orale. That's for the shadow band refugee. Teresa Alan, thank you so much. Matching you with what? Matching you with Ungi's matching all of the things. There's Mikey matching Thomas D. Marcos Covilla, thank you so much. Love you both. We love you, Marcos. Thank you so much. Michael Ungerleiter matching Shadow Band, matching Marcos. Kemp Schwari, Kate, thank you so much. It is always appreciated on the couch, Kemp Schwari. He loves it when you do that. Matching Kemp Schwari, Panda, heart, or I think that's just, those are bombs or smokes. I don't know what that is.
No, they're hearts. They're love. Hearts.
Ungi said match Panda. He goes, I've missed one of the fives, so I'm matching whoever that was. Benny Massimo. How you doing, Benny? He's been in the whole show. Japan, a country of 128 million, uses ivermectin for COVID-19 and averages 2 deaths a day from COVID. Benny, they also, we're going to bring more of this information to the table. I'm going to do a show with Niko later on. We're going to talk about what we're seeing in parts of Brazil of doing some tests. They're also mixing it with a perfect cocktail of the zinc, the C. They're even doing IVs. Nigeria, 240 million people, uses ivermectin and averages 1 death a day from COVID. The U.S. with 335 million does not use ivermectin and averages 2,000 COVID deaths per day. Enough said. Benny, while we're here too, and he also put up a link to worldmeters.info coronavirus, and Benny, we will check that out too as well. I would also like to say that too, that in this particular situation, when it comes to the Omicron, there's another treatment that has to be brought in, and we'll talk about that later. Gloria Jones, thank you so much. Thanks for covering the clips, y'all. PM Bitchface gave us a lot of plans out there in the open for us that almost no one's covering. Also, Peruanos,
yeah.
Peruanos, come get your boy Castillo. Davos did a panel on Latin America today, and it was gross. Castillo seemed not interested in interfering with their plans at all. Judito, Caños.
Jodidos. Coños.
Coños, like coño. From the river to the sea. No cap, Gloria Jones. No clap.
Yeah.
No cap. Shine
no
the
clap.
light. No clap. No cap. No clap. This video is apropos to today's discussion and their grand plans.
We'll check it out. Thank you, Shine the Light.
Thank you, Shine the Light. Benny Massimo, that's the opposite of communism. It is corporate totalitarianism. And Teresa Anlin says, absolutely fee. Guys, we got $418 in the kitty today. Ungi matched the $200. Thank you so much, guys.
Troy C, you missed.
Who?
Troy C, go get it, fams. Troy C, he tipped 10. So it's 428 now. Guys, you guys are amazing. Thank you.
Guys, thank you so much. We got one more section. All you people that are on the YouTubes, get on over. Saul Construct, get your butt on over to Rokfin. We love you, Saul. Ramsey R, Troy C, Aaron Cole. Guys, let's get on over there. It's not going to be a long section. We got to get done over here because we got other people here and other plans. We are going over our time limits like always. So, Rokfin only?
Rokfin only.
We got to communicate with Johnny?
Yes, we do. So, guys, we're going to go on Rokfin only. I'm going to post the link of the Rokfin in here in the chat. And again, I actually, you know what? That article has inspired me to definitely do a panel with Steve and Caleb on that particular text and what they think about it as well. Sam, I think that would be actually a great lineup. So
it would be.
Yes.
It would.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd like to get Shadow Band Refugee on that too, is because he's a master in theory and has a lot of great things to say. There's a lot of people we can bring to the table. We have a great panel on that stuff and have a serious adult conversation about the whole situation. Gene Zybeck, it says, thank you for your reporting and the truth. Thank you so much, guys. Remember, all the donations today are going to the DC trip, boots on the ground, for the big anti-mandate protest this weekend. A lot of good names are going to be there. Come on over to Rokfin. That's it for YouTube, boys and girls. We'll see you on the flip side. Rokfin only. Later.
Convo out. See you on Rokfin.
Rokfin only.